the 20th day of June 2023. Welcome everybody. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana. Hope you had a great day. We got tons and tons and tons and tons of crazy stuff to get through tonight. Consider calling in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. So Korea's gone insane. And I'm at this all the time, but I wouldn't have predicted what we're seeing over this last couple of weeks, and will continue for quite a while apparently, is South Korea has embarked upon a propaganda campaign 12 years after the reactors have blown up. They're claiming that there's no adverse side effects whatsoever. There was no releases into the ocean from the buildings don't even exist anymore. I'm completely confused of the approach the government has taken. And so it kind of explains it here. Will South Korea's vicious, hateful, idiotic Fukushima tanks propaganda compromise the country's future? And what I mean by that is, by pretending there's no harm and encouraging people to eat the radioactive food and get sick, the outcome is really nasty. This is genocide. It's sedition in the worst ways, and it's actual genocide what they're committing against the population. The population is not allowed to have a debate. South Korea is not even a population. They're actually not allowed to have a debate of any type. We've been covering this pretty well for the last week since it started. And I could never predict that 12 years later, a country, particularly one like South Korea, would embark on a propaganda campaign of this magnitude. And they're going to hold daily briefings and to assure you that everything is okay, and that when Japan releases the tanks, they'll be paying attention. But the tanks are actually empty because the reactors are long gone, right? The plume covered the entire planet. By the majority of the models worldwide, the international government university models, just on a fraction of what's actually lost, are claiming the buildings actually blew up. So this is what's so confusing about this story. The plumes have covered the planet. There's so many models. You got the French's model. You got the Norwegian Institute for Air Research models. I can't even remember which one. This one is off the top of my head. The tanks, you can fill them up 6 times a day with a typical reactor, all of them. The reactors normally use 1 million gallons a minute, and when they melt down, they're going to need a lot more. That's 4,500 tons a minute. And so the news cycle today basically dictated why we got the name of the show tonight. Hi, everybody. Last night's video is still only at 126 views. It's absurd numbers since about a month ago, when they don't got anybody to pick on. There are all these public relation firms from different countries They really don't got no one to pick on. They got me tortured. I'm like the only fly on the planet. Everybody out there got to pull the legs and arms and wings off me in the propaganda industry, which is your media. I think tomorrow night's show is, should we get rid of journalism? Do we really? They're like the worst thing that ever happened to us. And they profess themselves even today as some kind of beacon of light. They're trash, basically, right? They're irrelevant, and they're very dangerous. They're doing exactly what South Korea. So it's very painful to see a country that's supposed to be a democracy like South Korea vehemently denying people the ability to even have a conversation, let alone a debate. And there will be no open debates, nothing. The universities have turned against the population and are actively spreading an absurd amount of propaganda. And this is 2023, for goodness sakes, and the population is being treated like they're 6 years old. Shut up, don't think, don't talk, don't just eat the radioactive food, get sick and die like a good slave, shut your mouths. And the police are sitting there, the police are allowing this to happen. The police of South Korea. The police are allowing all this to happen, sitting in silence and letting this happen. And probably willing to attack anybody that protests. Like, that's not a society. That's not even something in a Hollywood horror movie. I can't actually come up. You need a new term just to describe it. The betrayal is a complete betrayal throughout the whole bloody democracy itself. Cars are still abandoned all over. They got 30 million one-ton bags picked up, but there's nothing got out, according to South Korea. I'm flabbergasted. You will be too if you hang around. I don't blame you if you don't, because it's insane. But this is such a hardcore topic. It's not your... It's an acquired taste, maybe. Let's put it that way. Politics of fear, even though it should be essential learning for every human, retroactively on the planet. But just think about this headline here. Politics of fear. Politics of fear. Over Fukushima wastewater release. This is water they're pouring over the reactor cores. But the problem is, it's been going on for 12 years nonstop. There is nothing in the tanks. If you fill up the tanks with water poured over a reactor core, you can never get near a tank, and they can't build another tank on site. You probably won't be able to get back on the site. The tank's not thick enough to shield you. I'm going to try to walk you through it and shake your head in amazement. It's like finding another alien species in the universe, and it's called South Korean government. The paper says it's important for the Korean government to concentrate on verifiable scientific fact with people swiftly, transparently, and continuously. So what they're referring to is brainwashing. Scientific fact doesn't exist anymore. This is media. I'm going to play the clip. I've played it several thousand times. I put these 4 little clips together and then a picture of the building that they're claiming they're on top of. And I'm still... my site's been up for a decade. My website, thenuclearproctologist.org. It was a decade old a few days ago. I didn't celebrate it because there's nothing to celebrate. Listen to these people in their own words telling you they're 100 feet above the wreckage. And if that's not worth fighting against, what actually is?
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
We should do every show from here on out just on that one clip. And sit here all night and look at the clip and marvel at the evil. There's nothing more evil than what we looked at that time. Excluding my head, my bald head maybe, but... Did anybody bother to tell them buildings blew up? There's no ghost zones where people haven't lived for over 12 years? But according to South Korea, nothing has happened. And there, again, this picture in the last 4 weeks or something showed up, and we're seeing it constantly. Every 3 or 4 stories for a while there, we were seeing that that was the only picture anybody. If you use the picture, that was the picture they were going to use. Was this picture right here? So that kind of tell you where we're headed for. The sales of sea salt are said. So people are so brainwashed, they think there's no radiation released, so they better buy salt now. That's how effective they've been for 12 years. But now, people are just like they know they can smell the smoke, but they can't see the fire, and they can't figure. They know something's up though, and 85% of them are protesting. Some shoppers joined wholesalers in stockpiling salt because they're worried about the radiation, the ocean getting contaminated with tritium, which doesn't exist actually in a nuclear meltdown. It's drowned out by all the other isotopes. Yeah, it exists, but let's be realistic. You're pouring water over a reactor core. The last isotope you're worried about is tritium. It's the very, very, very last one. And it's still a nasty isotope, but it's the last one you're worried about. We've been fighting this for 12 years, so... But now they're taking it to a whole different stage. They up the ante a little tiny bit. Okay, a lot. And poor South Korea, the victims of South Korea, I don't know what words you can use to describe the people of South Korea. They're running, it's like, if you went there, you would expect to see people banging into each other all day long because they're just completely just zombies. Jeez, what was that? And then walking to somebody else, what was that? That's what you expect to see when you go there, because that's how the media and the universities and the governments is treating them. Such fears may be excessive. Is there something wrong with me that I'm worried about this? That the complete hoodwinking of an entire country for a deadly industry that has poisoned their resources. You know, there was 55 countries disagrees with South Korea. 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. Almost half of Japan, because these were big prefectures. These were the producers. Akito's not so much, right? But no, South Korea is worried about what might happen instead of, worrying what has happened. The proper way to be a human in 2023 is to worry about what happened. They're pretending that never happened. And a stupid single building, there's 4 of them, unfortunately, and 4 lousy buildings has forced the media worldwide to go in a panic mode and lie to the population. And it's the nuclear industry. throttling all the humans and all the animals and birds and insects and biota on the entire planet. It says sun-dried salt will not be affected by tritium. Tritium. Try making this up on your own. You know, 30 million one-ton bags are real. So it definitely got out. But it wasn't tritium. They're not picking up one-ton bags of tritium. They didn't abandon all those communities because of tritium. Does that make sense, or is that stupid too, I guess? Making sense is stupid. There you go. I was going to start doing dress up like in a chicken costume or something and do my broadcast with a Freddy Krueger mask on. Instead of calling it radiation, we'll call it bananas. I know, but think about it. It might be okay. Let me show you other isotopes, just because. Sounds stupid, I know, but. These bags are not full of tritium. It was never mentioned a single bloody time. When they're looking at food throughout the country, checking for radiation, they're not checking for tritium. The 55 countries that banned the food worldwide weren't banning it because of tritium levels. Does that make any sense to anybody anymore? None of the plume models that I show you are of tritium. La, la, la. Oop, filet. There it is. I knew it would show up eventually. Okay, there we go. Let's do this. Hang on, it's just... It just never stops. Stupid has taken over our planet and it's called nuclear. Hang on. Do you know the mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima? They're given second-hand paper suits? Not because of tritium. It was never mentioned till recently. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is curium isotopes. Curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium isotopes. And plutonium was named after the devil. Just a reminder, because iodine-129 in the ocean pre-nuclear industry worldwide was estimated to be around 100 kilograms. Just Sellafield releases more than that each year. But the difference is Sellafield is man-made, this is natural. And this took 4 billion years to collect 100 kilograms. And Sellafield and La Hague, respectively, discharged 1,640 kilograms in just a few years. In the English Channel, 720 kilograms in the Irish Sea, with a 15 million year half-life. And so it'll saturate your thyroid glands and cause you to mutate your hormones too, right? And insects and birds and mammals and animals and everything else. They're not looking for tritium fallout after the meltdowns. They were looking for iodines, for instance, and there was 220 million atoms per liter. And it continued for many months at high elevated levels. La 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 la. I need a bunch of circus music to play for some of this stuff, because that will be perfectly appropriate when you watch it. And there's many different isotopes of iodines and xenons, and between 450,000 times above levels there before Fukushima in Washington and throughout Japan, of course, and Canada. Of the 133, a lot of the other ones were there also. They're not looking for scientists to work at. There's no North Korean scientists working at Fukushima, by the way. Help wanted add 60 employees that can carry out a conversation. Obviously, they're looking for nuclear scientists by that ad, right? Krypton, remember Superman? Superman's isotopes will kill you, and that's how he made your children complacent in increments over many decades. Did you know that South Korea closed 130 schools officially, but this administration says there's nothing happened, everything is perfect, have a nice day, don't open your mouth. Don't try to have a debate. We're not going to tolerate it. Last administration would have never put South Korea in this position. And the current opposition, the Democratic Party, is vehemently fighting for the truth, believe it or not, which is extraordinary, really. Some of the politicians from the Democratic Party about a month ago went to Japan on a fact-finding mission. Nobody in the communities would talk to them. TEPCO wouldn't talk to them. They weren't allowed to go to. They were turned back from the Fukushima plants. This is politicians from South Korea. And shortly after, they sent over 10 scum nuclear from the Nuclear Institute, the Lion Nuclear Institute. And reactors run on uranium. And they're talking about tritium. They're telling the population, all the population's regurgitating with these artificial protests is tritium. This is quite extraordinary to watch this happening on our planet. No mention of plutonium. Plutonium, each reactor had around 18, or building, including the fuel pools, would have had around 18,000 pounds of plutonium. Americium plumes covered the entire planet. I'm really surprised that anybody's mentioned the word tritium. Neptunium, plumes covered the planet. That's TEPCO's numbers, by the way. And they're vicious. They're cowards, but the industry is vicious. And remember, I showed you the plutonium model. Here's another plutonium, or the plutonium isotopes. Don't forget the models of the radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. I've never seen a model of tritium. Or the cesium model is this one right here. Oh, I'll smurf that up 1 second. I'm just trying to be reasonable there's 56 million people are being poisoned now, targeted in South Korea. So the cesium model is from the French government. So all these models are from the major institutions. This is 1 million to 10 million times weapons fallout. And this is only by the 18th you're looking at. This is 7 days after the tsunami. This is, let me just make sure, because some people That's the 18th. That's March the 18th, 2011. That's 7 days. But the last meltdown started on the 16th. Well, it could have been more after that, but let's say the 16th. By the 16th, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 detonated a few times and burnt continuously for a couple of days. And so this plume has only just started, right? That's cesium-137 plume. And one of the first things it does is cover South Korea. And strontium, which peaks after 1,000 days, after 3 years basically, and then it stays peaked. There's a 100-to-1 ratio of the strontium-90. There's many other strontiums you need to worry about. But it's a 100-to-1 ratio of the cesium-137, which is at extraordinary numbers. And strontium is a bone seeker, so for children in particular, and small species, and insects and birds, it's going to go into their bones and mutate their stem cells. So what South Korea government is doing is going about the very best way of poisoning everybody in their country. That's what they're actually doing. They're going about the very, very best way with a sustained propaganda campaign of disinformation. Boom. What the hell? There's no potassium plumes, Katja. That's disinformation you were reading, unfortunately. Yeah. Anybody that, like any academics that talk about potassium are manipulating people. That's the problem, is you don't have any academics to turn to. Yeah. Let's keep her going here. They're wearing tungsten vests outside of reactor 3. Not because of tritium, because of neutron bombardments and gamma shines and X-rays, alphas and beta rays and everything else, and X-rays by proxy, right? Not because of tritium. Water cannons can't spray the reactor because the radiation is too high, but not because of tritium. Anybody that mentions tritium during the nuclear meltdown is that's a disinformation campaign against you. High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters. So this is not potassium or tritium or something like that. And potassium is not made by a nuclear meltdown. Potassium is natural. Everything on the planet is already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection, right? Seniors sought for frontline radiation cleanup in Japan because it's not tritium. So how come the nuclear scientists from South Korea weren't volunteering to clean up in the communities all around Japan? Temporary workers, not academics. And you can't repair a destroyed building when it's a nuclear meltdown. So instead of saying temporary workers in Japan brave radiation, they say Japanese workers brave radiation for a temp job. But radiation not a temp job, that's a 1,000-year job. What a disgusting, so the editor at the last second changed the words around. So it wouldn't make any sense. Because they hate your guts. They literally and figuratively hate your guts. Top Tokyo doctor dealing with nuclear workers demanded government step in for safety reasons. Some of them can't even read. So, does this sound like nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear... You know what I mean, right? The homeless are taken to work at Fukushima and ready to die. The homeless. The mentally disabled are the heroes, and the homeless are treated like disposable people. Even Forbes, lunatic Forbes, said it's outrageous that the homeless people are being sold to companies to get lethal doses at the nuclear meltdown. A cynical disregard for human life. And so they're not talking about tritium. Tritium was nowhere in that lexicon until a couple of years ago when the tank, in 2021, when the tank propaganda machine got into full speed. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima and given worse. See, when they call a paper suit a radiation suit, that's really offensive to me. That's unbelievable offensive to even suggest that what they're using is a radiation suit. And because the tritium, so why are we talking about tritium? That's what South Korea is doing to their population, is they're violently using the word tritium as the only word. No other word is allowed, just tritium. Ooh, brain freeze. No, they're not even Tyvek. They burn, TEPCO said they burn 7,000 paper suits a day. 7,000 paper suits a day. If they were actually going to use Tyvek, which are very expensive suits, imagine how much that will cost, 7,000 actual Tyvek thick suits each day, right? Because you can't use them a second time, because they're going to be so radioactive, you can't put them all together in one room. And so burning them, you're just going to liberate the radiation that landed onto it into the environment on top of that. So, story after story after story again today on tritium and South Korea. And they're having daily briefings where they're just viciously promoting disinformation to the entire population. And the nuclear industry is leading the charge with the politicians of the ruling party. To be discharged through wastewater will not affect people's health, says the Korean government, tritium. And so I'm pretty upset about that they're that evil and that they're that belligerent. They're doing the opposite of protecting. The amount of radiation from one adult chest x-ray is 0.1 millisievert, while that of tritium to be released into the sea after being treated is 0.00003 millisieverts. And so that's, because this is the beginning of this campaign that's very going to be sustainable for who knows how long. There's a lot of disinformation coming out that you might never see again. So you got to be, unfortunately, we're forced to pay attention because they have to build a story. And we're seeing these little tidbits in different stories, which is emblematic of a massive propaganda campaign. Civic groups, news medias, raised the issue of long-term effect of releasing tritium. Tritium. I haven't got no models of tritium. No one's worried about tritium that knows anything about this. You're worried about uranium and plutonium and curium and all the other fission products. Unfortunately, and you should be worried about tritium, but that's going to be the last one you're worried about, unfortunately. And look how they do the brainwashing. You see tritium like that, that's mad cows swimming in Fukushima wastewater discharge. So I didn't know what to make of Jason Lim story. And as soon as I seen the headline, I was like, oh my God, what is this going to turn out like? I wonder. La 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 la. So you need some circus music for this. Will South Korea's vicious, hateful, and it's idiotic to poison your own country. Fukushima tanks propaganda compromise the country's future. How can it not? You're destroying the country. It's the very best way to destroy a country is what they're doing. So they're going to quote the International Atomic Energy Agency. Let me fix a couple of things here. We're having... La 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 la. Mic check, 1, 2. I don't know what to do anymore. Mic check. I must do it. Let's try right there anyway. Mad cows swimming in Fukushima discharge. He goes through a whole spiel. He talks about mad cow disease. And the minute that you, like the International Atomic Energy is not a regulatory agency. So why are they in the conversation? Because that's what George Bush Sr. called the New World Order, was the United Nations, which is 195 militaries. That's the very last thing you need to do is put 195 militaries under one roof. And over many decades, they'll cooperate to the point where they're a threat to all resources, to the air, to the water, and to the food, and specifically to you and the species. And this is the foundation. It doesn't exactly say the water is safe, but it's a close second. But they're like the very last people in the conversation. Well, you should never have anything to do with the UN, particularly all the subsidies, like the World Health Organization, International Atomic Energy Agency, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, UNICEF, the World Trade Organizations, and United Nations itself, which Eisenhower in the 50s, because it used to be called the League of Nations pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Eisenhower described them as the military-industrial complex. George Bush Sr. described them as the New World Order. And when you look at them, that's 100% what you got. You got a takeover of Earth. It took quite a few decades for it to work, but it worked. I think we had 40 views after an hour and a half last week, because we were talking about South Korea. I say we'll have less tonight, but it looks like they got no one else to censor. You really think they're not going to censor me? Especially because I make sense. The hell is going on? My throat is dried right out. Some nights are like that when you're doing 5 shows a week, right? Based on studies and reports for authoritative and trusted sources. You can't trust people that are going to lie to you. When they lie to you, why would you trust them ever again? And their entire history is lies. So I believe that Fukushima discharge is safe for fish and human alike. However, I don't want to eat the fish caught in those waters. I don't want my family to do that either. Is that hypocritical? You're damn right. But it's a hypocrisy that's rooted deeply in my better safe than sorry instincts. Remember Mad Cow and the propaganda that came with that? So mad cow swimming in Fukushima waters may be perfectly safe to eat, but I won't be eating them because my friends won't be eating them. And until they start eating them, what's the nature of the agency of freedom that I wield? Mad cows swimming in Fukushima waters may be perfectly safe to eat, but I'm so jealous of that sentence. It's such a great sentence, right? Mad cows swimming in Fukushima nuclear wastewater may be perfectly safe. Because who thinks of a cow swimming, first off? Come on, Daisy, you gotta go for a swim. Japan's seafood business questions plan to release the treated water. They're using the word treated right in the sentence. Water used to cool the molten nuclear fuel. You can't treat that. Right? You can't separate all the radiation out of the fuel rod, and you can't separate all the radiation out of the water. You crazy critters. And there goes the tritium. Boom, boom, boom. Pow, pow, pow. In Iwaki City, which is a nuclear wasteland, in the Fukushima prefecture itself, a government official said the effects of the releases will be minimal for human and the environment. They don't have a right to take away the environment for 8 billion people. They don't have a right to do it. They'll never have a right to do it. And why are we letting them do it? The most important asset on the entire planet, we're going to sit in silence? All the world is? And then let these criminals come out and just fill the narrative up with it's an incredible betrayal. We should demand that all journalists be jailed for life for not speaking out. They're not gangsters, they're not racketeers, they're not swindlers, they're not robbers, they're not burglars, they're not muggers, they're terrorists, they're criminals, they're malfeasance, it's atrocious, it's monstrous what they're doing to us. The government will conduct emergency. Government to conduct radiation tests on the beach waters ahead. This is the South Korean government to conduct radiation tests on beach waters ahead of the summer vacation season. Get a load of this story. Emergency radiation tests. Emergency radiation tests on the waters of 20 major beaches in South Korea to alleviate concerns over Japan's plan to release contaminated water, which they're calling tritium, from buildings that don't exist no more, that they're calling crippled. The officials, the mass murderers themselves, have said Tuesday. The mass murderers also plan to examine radioactivity levels in the high sea waters near Fukushima every month. And I already took water samples from those areas in April in order to compare the tritium from the before till after the releases. The Vice Ocean Minister Song Sang-kong said, "We'll ensure that our citizens, our slaves, can enjoy their summer vacation with ease," Song said. during a daily government briefing 12 years later on Japan's planned tritium release. Because the tritium is the only word they're using, right? So I'm just superseding it before they get a chance to later. Because they're rolling this out, and they're all the universities are on board. Every single journalist, every media is on board. We'll continue on a weekly basis, daily, weekly basis after the waters are released. And they're going to up the testing area from 92 places to 200, looking for tritium. This is astounding. This is humiliating that this is what a journalist is now. This is what a professor is. Somebody that murders everybody and everything. And everybody's going to get sick from this. How are you going to... You can do it now because you're not seeing it, but you're going to see the harm. Well, you are seeing it, certainly. It's such a confusing topic because you're the only one who's willing to talk about other isotopes. They're not willing to consider anything. They're not even considering anything ever released. This is an absolute false depiction as far as they're concerned. Nothing melted down, nothing escaped, everything is perfect. There's not 30 million one-ton bags. There's no other radiation. Japan got the magic bullet. They can extract all the radiation from anything. And the only thing that's left is tritium. And tritium is harmless. That's their story. How is that possible? Just because they were elected and they're now the ruling party, to launch a campaign to disease the entire population, how is, like, the country should revolt. The country needs to revolt. The country can't just sit there and let this happen. A year ago, I couldn't have dreamt it would be like this. When I knew that this day was coming, when they would get close to the time and the propaganda machine would kick into gear. But what I'm seeing is just astounding. There's no system whatsoever. There's not a single checks and balances anywhere on the entire planet. It's all controlled opposition. It's all captured regulatory agencies. This is a plume covering the planet in 30-something days in that particular model. The planet is actually covered after about 20 days. So that's about 20 days right there. And fallout. The fallout doesn't stop. Just because this little video stops, the fallout doesn't stop. It's a continuous plume. This is not like a puff, like you got a campfire. Think about smoke signals where they send up these little smoke signals. And that little plume drifts along, right? This is a plume that covers the entire planet and every facet of it. Every pond, every river, every estuary, every farmer's field, every toy in the garden, every swing in the garden, every schoolyard. It covers everything. There's nothing escapes it. And they're making it 1 billion times worse by doing what they're doing. There's no nuclear renaissance, and so there's no benefit to do what they're doing. It's just they've had so much power for so long. The current generation, who's a product of inbreeding, of generations of inbreeds, is the entitled generation that we're dealing with right now, where their parents were scumbag in the nuclear industry, because their parents were scumbags in the nuclear industry, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the current generation is completely disconnected from what it is to be a human, what the human experience actually is. And I'm heartbroken. I'm literally heartbroken because of the irreversible path that we're now on. The seawater near Fukushima will also be subject to government monthly inspections. and announced every month, separately by the Ocean Ministry and the Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, which is, there's no nuclear safety, there's no security. They're the opposite. They're 100% unequivocally a criminal organization now. They abrogated their responsibilities and every facet of it. South Korea will maintain its import ban on seafood. We covered a story last night where South Korea denied this model from a German institute. They refused to acknowledge it. No, it's not real. Only tritium is real. Nothing else is real. Only what we say. Science doesn't matter. Reality doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. Only what we say matters. And what they say is there's no adverse effects. Nothing has happened. Everything is perfectly safe. There's no millions of one-ton bags. There's no radioactive fallout. There's no collusions. How do we end this madness? How do we claw our way back from this madness? I'm just a very humble person who's trying to do an educational and start a conversation. I'm banned everywhere. I'm completely banned. I don't even exist. I got 18 viewers on a program I've been doing for over a decade. My website was a decade old a few days ago. It was 10 years old a few days ago. By the way, I had to go and get another credit card today to pay my site because I'm way past due, and I got dinged for that. It's now 480 Canadian dollars to pay for a website so the world would have a place to go, because they don't have a place to go. And I've been tortured the entire day. I went and got a new credit card, and that didn't work. I've been doing this for 9 years, no issue. And this year I can't get one of my credit cards to work. And so I'll get it eventually, I'm sure, but I got so many things on my plate. And this is torture, to see this being denied. Because they're claiming they're in the top of the building that don't even exist. From the major medias worldwide doing it. Park also criticized the opposition Democratic Party for insulting the administration's efforts to dispel the health concerns of people, to dispel the concerns. Distorted claims, including accusations our government is representing the Japanese government. That's what they're doing. They're only repeating the Japanese narrative. They haven't got a single dissenting voice. Our insulting remarks towards dedicated civil servants, think about that statement, who are doing their best for the sake of the citizens, the slaves, the citizens. When you hear the word citizens, that's usually a slur. That it's an insult when they say it, when they use that word. You know, if you got a business, does your employee call you a citizen, or did he call you the boss, right? Because you're the boss of these people. This study came out today. Radiocesium-bearing microparticles, cesium microparticles. These were considered hot particles, by the way. We've covered that in another couple of studies over the last couple of weeks about the microparticles from cesium, which is just one of the, and not tritium, but cesium, discovered on mask worn during indoor cleaning. Indoor cleaning. I'll get to that one because I've done a couple of other stories without realizing that I didn't, because I was jumping around. I was trying to get a clear picture of these creatures, and I forgot to go back to that story. But I do pick up the story in a few stories. That's super interesting. We'll get to that in a minute. The Filipinos speak out against Japan's tritium releases. So this is a purpose It's an amazing, and it's really something to watch this propaganda campaign play out. So they're inviting people to protest tritium, not uranium, plutonium, and stuff like that, but tritium. They're actually inviting people to have protests and get the media. Media will only report on people that are protesting tritium. We call them medium, but there's some weird, disgusting creatures. That's what they are. Concerns here over plans to dump toxic waste. Now, you're not allowed to call it toxic waste. South Korea was quite clear about that yesterday in their headlines. You can't go calling it anything but wastewater or tritium. You can't call it radioactive water, and you can't call it toxic water. You got to call it wastewater or tritium. You can't call it anything else. And the government said they're going to make sure nobody calls it anything else. Man, what a stupid. And you're not allowed to call it nuclear contaminated water. So stop that right now. Give that up right now. The move threatens food security, human health, and the livelihood of millions of Filipinos. Right. But it's been going on for 12 years. This is not something new. Sadly and unfortunately, this is not something new. I'll direct you to the reactor 3 detonation. The explosion was felt 25 miles away. The fuel pools would have been at the top of the buildings, each of these buildings. At the very top in those two depictions, those red fuel pools. There's nothing left to the building, as you can see, to your left. So this is not something that's going to happen next week or the week after. This has been going on for 12 years straight. But according to Japan, this has never happened. South Korea, this has not happened. The universities, the nuclear scientists in South Korea all agree that has never happened. So, what's the point? What's the point of having a country when scientists and academics are going to do this to you? The technocrats, they're not stupid. They know what's up. They're not delusional. They know what's up. This is 100% just stab you in the back. They don't matter and you don't matter. None of it makes any sense. Why go through the effort, right, to lie to you? Why go through this kind of effort to lie to you? That's the question that needs answering. Why are they going through such a huge effort to have a disinformation campaign? Because the result of this kind of disinformation is everybody gets sick forever. Your parents and grandparents don't get to have a wonderful senior years. Your children don't get to have a future. Your country has zero future and is downhill from here right from the get-go. Right from 1 week ago, you started the destruction of your own country. You endorsed it by playing your part in the nuclear industries and universities and journalists. Why go through this cover-up? This is a cover-up. When you look at what they've done at Reactor 4, all of these academics pretending they're in a building that don't exist. So it wasn't just the journalists, it was the CBS media, the producers, the editors, the videographers, the people that are paying the checks. Everybody had to be in on it. Everybody at BBC with Rupert Winfield Hayes. It wasn't just Rupert Winfield. It had to be the entire network, had to participate in that lie for it to work. And they couldn't have dissenting voices. So CNN had to do it, ABC had to do it, and everybody else had to do it for that to work. Did they know the difference? Why would they go through that effort? What's the point of going through this kind of effort over a lousy couple of buildings if it's just tritium? Why go through that effort? Why go through that effort? A report recently released by TEPCO shows the radioactive elements 137 in black rockfish caught in the harbor of Fukushima plant did 18,000 becquerels a kilogram. And right now, everybody seems to be using that same chunk of evidence, right? And it's good evidence. But the only evidence you need to beat their narrative is that picture right there. Take a screenshot of that and email it to all your friends and ask them why are they faking that. Put that on big placards and campaign promotional advertisements and distribute that out door to door in leaflets and ask the world to ask these people why they done that. Why are they pretending they're on a building that don't exist? If you want to see the whole house of cards crumble, that's the proper way to go about it. A report recently released by TEPCO shows radioactive elements of cesium. And again, when I hear cesium, I generally get upset about it because there's so many other isotopes too. So the Philippines, a campaign they're talking about is about the tritium, not about what's already happened. Not about what's continuing to happen, not about the massive releases. It's about what might be released because they don't know what you know. Chinese net citizens boycott Japanese beauty products over the tritium water. So they're creating this descent, right, to drown out any real narratives. And so the only thing that's allowed to have a conversation is if you're arguing about tritium, because you contribute to the propaganda if you do, right? So China's in on it, Taiwan is in on this, South Korea's in on it, and Japan obviously, right? They're working together, the nuclear industries in all of these countries, they're working together to manipulate the population, which is a huge chunk of the population. The second worst nuclear accident in history. Fukushima was 4 reactors they admit to. 8 fuel pools are gone for sure. Chernobyl never had pure uranium plutonium fuel. It didn't have 4 decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings because it was brand new. And these reactors are much bigger than Chernobyl, so the volume is huge, and it's 40 years worth in each building. All lost. It dwarfs Chernobyl in every sense of the word. And so, to my utter horror, there's nobody out there providing education on this subject. And the only ones out there, we cover them in a 24-hour news cycle typically. Treated water, second worst, treated, using cosmetics. 79% of the 4,500 participants in the poll said they would not continue to use Japanese skincare and makeup. I wouldn't sit into a car from Japan. I wouldn't eat off plates from Japan. Radiocesium, back to that story, radiocesium-bearing microparticles discovered on mask worn during indoor cleaning. So these people were given just your typical strap-on mask. They weren't like a full face even. They were just like covering your nose and your mouth a little bit, right? They weren't sealed masks, and you can't filter radiation. And so they collected up the mask. Each day, when you took the mask off, you put it in a Ziploc bag, you zipped it up, put your name on it, and the date on it, and the community you're in. And so 284 masks, and this was in Futaba, Namie, Okuma, and Tomioka towns, which is quite a few towns we're talking about. Of the 284 masks worn in the study, significant cesium radioactive microparticles were detected in 268. Like 94% or something. 94.4% of the mask were significantly contaminated with microcesium particles. These are considered hot particles too. They found 44 new cesium microparticles in 28. So that this radioactive cesium aerosols adhered to the house dust. They went into a nuclear wastelands that were abandoned and cleaned up the houses for people to move back into. This is the people they're studying. These are lab rats, right? The only way you're going to take that job if you know it's nothing about radiation. And so radiocesium, you can see how much propaganda with the radiocesium. They're not looking for the real stuff like curium and plutonium and americium and neptunium and all the other stuff. Most studies will only look at cesium, and they barely do a job of that. But the fact that they studied these human guinea pigs written informed consent was obtained from the people who owned the homes and the people who done the house cleaning activity. So therefore everything was legal. It's okay to poison somebody if you can get them to sign a piece of paper, right? Because those people should have removed all their clothing, cut their hair off immediately. Nuclear is clean, but can the Philippines handle this risk? Philippines got a $2.2 billion reactor that was finished it was ready to start up basically, or the fuel, the same day Chernobyl blew up. And so they mothballed it. But every year they pay out around 50 million of the Philippines pesos, is it, or something? Which is basically 1.2 million a year American. For how long is that now? 37 years. Each year they pay that out to do the maintenance, because eventually people's memories will fade, or those that know better will die or pass away. And then the nuclear industry can swoop in and reopen it. Fukushima Reconstruction Agency, talking about evil, there's no end to it, is it? The Japanese essay competition for non-Japanese nationals on the theme of Fukushima. So they got a competition for non-nationals on the theme of the Fukushima. Like this is about propaganda. Persistent impact of Fukushima decontamination on soil erosion and suspended sediment. So the decontamination, when you picked up 30 million one-ton bags, none of it was full of tritium. Nothing. No tritium for you, sir, kind sir. Ecolab branding insensitive. So this was a response from the academics because they were accused of being monsters by using the victims left behind in the nuclear wasteland as lab rats. And the researchers would never insult them by branding them or their natural environment as experimental materials. This is not a natural environment, it's a nuclear wasteland. They should have been, the academic community should have called for their evacuation. And every discipline of the academics sat in silence. Not for the first couple of years, actually. there was descending voices, right? And we cover that pretty regularly. But by 2014 or so, the industry had taken over all those jobs, and there was no descending voices. And now, 12 years down the road, I can't even be a descending voice in the most this is a huge topic. There's lots of English-speaking Koreans would love to hear this topic. And I'm talking probably several million of them would gladly want to listen to this show right now, because this is such a burning question over there, right? And they're being fed just relentless propaganda from journalists and universities and government agencies. And it's a daily propaganda machine now, demanding that nobody is allowed to talk about nuclear, only them, and they're only allowed to use their narrative. You're not allowed to have any other narrative. This is a study 2011 in May. Is it rational to doubt Fukushima's reports? Of course it is. And history's taught us you're supposed to. You absolutely unequivocally well, the people that do come here are pretty good. Out of the 44 viewers that came by my site so far, 30 of them gave me a thumbs up. So that's a huge ratio of people. But, we've been doing this for over a decade, and all we do is deal with facts. There's no propaganda, there's no misinformation, there's no I provide the documentations of most of my assertions, right? Officials have no right to dismiss as irrational the public's mistrust of the official lobbying groups' pronouncements about the 11th of March earthquake tsunami damage to Japan's reactors. The public in Japan and elsewhere has figured out two things about Fukushima. First, what might happen next is a potentially bigger problem than what has happened so far. Well, the date on that is May. So all the reactors have already detonated many times. Melted down, the plume has already covered the planet, circled the planet many times by this date. And so to suggest that the worst is to happen at Fukushima itself is utter incredible lack of knowledge. This is an academic study, I'll remind you, by the way. So it's not a lack of knowledge. As a result, a variety of precautions might be considered excessive, premature, and the public felt they could trust the authorities. Avoiding Japanese food, for example, or seeking out a supply of potassium iodine, suddenly becomes sensible and should not be branded as illogical, hysterical, or radiophobia. It's the closest you'll ever see to a dissenting opinion. Radiation monitoring in Japan goes do-it-yourself. And this was March the 25th. The Japanese population couldn't get measurements. They had to build their own Geiger counters, and hence SafeCast was born. And SafeCast, people like Asby Brown's job was 100% disinformation. And so the Japanese were supposed to issue periodic updates indexed here. When I went here, it was already gone. This was 2011 in March. Concern over nuclear energy are legitimate. But this is from Nature. Nature is very suspect. They got to be very... Combined message seems to have been, don't worry, things are under control, and Fukushima is not Chernobyl. And on the date of this, March the 30th, Fukushima dwarfed Chernobyl many magnitudes. And, well, Fukushima is certainly not Chernobyl. But I mean, by the 30th of March, everybody that would have wrote an article like this would have had access to the pictures and would have known that it was way worse than Chernobyl. The helicopter dumps water in a nuclear plant in Japan, March the 16th, because it's not tritium that they're worried about. Initially, just a few drops were carried out before the operation was suspended. Well, there was over 600 helicopter pilots in Chernobyl died. In Japan, they decided not to sacrifice that many people and stopped it after 4 tries. It came a few hours after the head of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission testified that spent fuel rods in Unit 4 of Japan's stricken Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant have been exposed, resulting in the emissions of extremely high levels of radiation. Resulting in the emission of extremely high levels of radiation because the fuel rods in Unit 4 were exposed. So that's a meltdown they're alluding to. Once the uranium fuel was no longer covered, this is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of America's statement. Once the fuel was no longer covered by water, the zirconium cladding that encases the fuel rods heated, generated hydrogen, said Alvarez, Robert Alvarez, we covered many times, and I don't like him because he tells a lot of lies. Shocking scholar at the Institute, senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, former official at the Department of Energy. They caught fire, resulting in a situation as serious, he told CNN. He said the next step may involve nuclear plant workers taking heroic acts. Asked to be more specific, he said this is a situation where people may be called in to sacrifice their lives. Not maybe, but would be, right? The Japanese government spokesman, Noriyuki Shikita, said, we are not seeing a level that is, for example, dangerous to human bodies beyond the very close vicinities of the reactors. But the Japanese Self-Defense Force helicopters, in the next paragraph, had to abort their missions because of high radiation levels. So officially, the government said there's no high radiation levels, and a few paragraphs later, they said the helicopters couldn't even get close to it. So telling a lie is natural for these people. Core cooling was not stable for Unit 2. Unit 2. What was the date on this? The 16th. Well, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 have already detonated multiple times. So for them to talk about Unit 2, we believe the spent fuel pool levels is decreasing in Unit 2. At Unit 3, the integrity of spent fuel pool appears to be compromised. There was a reaction between the zirconium cladding and the water, which is a meltdown. Gregory Jasko's grim announcement confirms fear the nuclear crisis would worsen, and they had already heightened earlier in the day when officials observed white vapor rising from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant number 3. This is the 16th. It detonated on the 15th. And there's only a stump left. And I showed you a picture earlier, but here's another picture to think about. When they said that statement, reactor 3 is to your left. The International Atomic Energy Agency director, who's not a regulatory, and they don't have any authority, says you'll travel to Japan as soon as possible to get the latest on the situation and to see how the UN's nuclear watchdog agency can best help the Japanese authorities. And he said he will stay one night. So you got 4 reactors melting down. You got 8 fuel pools melted down and detonated. And you're only going to spend one night there. And you're supposed to be the authority, right? In Washington, military officials Wednesday deployed an atmospheric detection aircraft the constant phoenix to insist in the radioactive materials in the atmosphere around Japan. And the strangest statement, the aircraft can detect radioactive clouds in real time. Now, I know some people, when I'll read their comments and blow up laughing, but I'm not laughing at them, I'm laughing with them because brilliant comments, right? And so when I laugh at somebody's comments, it's because it's funny, it's awesome. It's so rare for me to see anybody get it, so it catches me off guard and I get a giggle. And that's a good thing. I'm not trying to insult people if I laugh when I read your comments, because I like a sense of humor too, right? That's all I'm doing. The aircraft can detect radioactive clouds in real time. Well, imagine that. I gotta get a brick wall here so I can just run my head into it sometimes. Companies' handling of nuclear crisis sparks anger. And there's the TEPCO. Remember, we covered a story like with that same picture, I believe, where he was alleged with crime. We had good pictures from different angles, and we were able to zoom right in on his face. And when you zoom right in on his face, the one thing you notice for sure is he's not crying. And look at the other guy there staring at the camera. Hang on. Does this guy look like he's crying from TEPCO to anybody? Well, he's not crying, right? You see the guy to his left, though. He's staring at the camera. What's he doing so close to TEPCO? And look, he's got a sinister look on his face, the guy to his left, right? But Mr. TEPCO, right there, there's no tears. His eyes are not red or discolored. He's not rubbing his face. He's not hiding his face in shame. He doesn't want everybody to cut his throat, basically. When he got out, he went and got a few beer and celebrated the hoodwinking of humanity. One of their employees worked for TEPCO for 18 years, said, now I just feel hatred towards TEPCO. It's very difficult for me to say this since I have worked for them for 18 years, but I just think they should come clean with all the information they have. What was the date on that? March the 21st, 2011. Right from the start, there was frustration with how slow TEPCO was to reveal crucial information. And it already had a track record in the past years of falsifying and covering up maintenance and repair data at Fukushima. Japanese people are not the type of people who rise up and stage a coup d'etat. They just keep quiet and die. They're 100% correct, too. That's true for South Korea, obviously, right? People in my town just outside the exclusion zone are being told to stay inside. That doesn't make sense. How many people do they want to kill? And that's the right response, by the way. Stay inside, get sick, and die. How evil, right, to make people stay in a nuclear wasteland. Where are the authorities? Stay in your home, get sick, and die. Imagine what kind of monsters they actually are. If there is such thing as aliens, then they're in the nuclear industry, big time. Scientists still say that radiation levels outside the 12-mile area are not yet a cause for concern. What was the date on that? March the 21st? Yeah, it was 100% cause for concern. The whole planet at that stage was cause for concern. The government relies on TEPCO for information and a voice. Try wrapping your mind around that statement right there from 2011, 9 days later. The government is relying on a corporation for information on the nuclear meltdown. It should never exist on your planet. The single biggest regret humanity will ever have is nuclear. It makes me weak, sick to my stomach just to read that. It makes me weak just reading that. There is a tendency to avoid giving bad information upwards in Japan's society. But when it's the health of the entire nation, as TEPCO has discovered, it's a different matter altogether. TEPCO wasn't even a decommissioning authority. They had no qualifications to stay in charge of nuclear meltdowns. Every university on the planet should have rushed right there. Ay, 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 ay. Will Korea's seafood be safe after Japan dumps the Fukushima wastewater? That's today, or yesterday's story. Will Korea's seafood be safe after Japan dumps? So now they're pretending nothing has happened. Despite the scientific assessments which indicate that the seafood consumed by Korea has been and will continue to be safe. What a bizarre statement. They got the big crystal ball there and they're going to predict everything. The contaminated water will likely be coming their way after several years of circulating in the Pacific Ocean. Here's a model. Man. Because I got so much dragged in. I got to redo everything, define everything. Here's a 40-day model of radioactive fallout. How long does it take South Korea to get covered in radioactive fallout? Well, there goes South Korea right there, right? In that model, South Korea is less than 40 days. South Korea is covered. Here's another model based on 20 days. So in 20 days, how long? Japan's right there, South Korea's right here, right there. So how long did it take South Korea and China and Taiwan to get covered? If it covers the whole planet, most of the planet in the first 20 days. This model is up to March the 31st, 2011, which is 20 days. Seoul, South Korea, has been holding daily briefings since Thursday, largely in favor of Japan's planned Fukushima water disposal to address the lack of information and spread of misinformation that intensifies public fear. To address the lack of information, which is propaganda, or spread of misinformation, which is facts, that would intensify the public fear. The reason you got sirens around nuclear power plants in North America is so you can run away kicking and screaming and live to fight another day. You gotta be something really sadistically evil to sit at that table, folks. Seoul has echoed the International Atomic Energy Agency's view that tritium. So here's IAEA, which is not supposed to exist because it's a military-industrial complex, pushing that propaganda, which, of course, we cover all the time, right? We know that. But it's really blatant in those statements, right? The radiation exposure Koreans will experience will much lower than that of an X-rays. Well, an X-ray is a beam. It's a ray, right? What they're getting is physical atoms. When you eat the food is not beams per se, which is an X-ray. And an X-ray is typically, most people think of an X-ray as a medical X-ray, but when you got alphas and neutrons and betas and gammas, pulsing energy at the speed of light, the physical atoms. They pulse energy at the speed of light. When they hit each other, they change direction. That's a braking effect at the speed of light now, mind you. How much energy does it take to make something move the speed of light? And not only that, it causes an X-ray, a whole body X-ray every second. So to come out and employ that, even if they do, which they haven't stopped getting because radiation fallout hasn't stopped, won't ever stop falling out of the sky because it's still melting down. Claiming the water won't show up 4 to 5 years after it releases when it showed up in less than 20 days. I've done research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And what I discovered on these research expeditions was an extinction event. The species are actually wiped out. And to quantify that, I went back year after year to see if the species recovered. So this is not just like a one-time trip, which is still fine. I've done this year after year after year after year for 4 to 5 months a year. The species to your left, I took the pictures to the right. These are authentic before and after pictures. They were exterminated. They never recovered. They never came back. And you'll never take the pictures to your left again. It's an extinction event. And so the only way forward is to acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge it, you can't find a way forward. Living in denial is going to cost the lives of everybody and all the species ultimately. Pretending this never happened is the worst case scenario. It's simply not tenable on top of that. Japan showed an extra 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, not from tritium, but from actual massive radioactive emissions. Seoul's been holding daily briefings since Thursday, largely in favor of Japan's planned Fukushima wastewater disposal to address the lack of information or spread of misinformation that intensifies public fear. Tritium, X-rays, 4 to 5 years before it gets to them from now is what they're claiming, and containing 100,000 of tritium found in normal levels. And this, so this is the narrative we're going to be listening to from here on out, and they're establishing it now. And they're not even acknowledging physical atoms. They're talking about and using 0.0003 millisieverts is less radiation than a banana. So it's completely dishonest. And the people that are doing it got degrees in nuclear, or the nuclear universities, the heads, the professors of the major engineering, the nuclear departments. I just fear for everybody. I fear for everybody's pets, everybody's children. I fear for all the species greatly. I'm terrified by all of this propaganda. This literally terrifies me. It shocks me to my core. It wears me out every single day, and every night I come out and plead with my heart for the world to come to its senses. Because we can't have a future, is what this means. See? Nobody can and nothing can. And they don't have a right to take everybody's future away and the future of all the species and exterminate us. They don't have that right. And why did he sign on to this? Why did all the media pretend that the reactor 4 building was perfect. You know, the only way that can work is if everybody participated in the lie. But if it was harmless, why create such a big lie, see? It added Japan's plan to dump the wastewater into the sea was a more viable option than disposing of it through the air, which is evaporating into the air, which is constant dirty bombs. It's like burning radiation. Instead, it's in water, so you just evaporate. It's dirty bombs. It's so evil. I can't even wrap my mind around how we ever got to this, outside of no checks and balances. And so evil, with no incentive not to be evil, evil ran amok. And now humanity and the 8 million species will pay a horrible price for it. Moreover, burying the wastewater in Japan's soil proved to be virtually impossible. So they can build a tunnel a mile offshore, but they can't build a tunnel underground, eh? Really? Well, the problem is they haven't stopped dumping it. And they're going to be dumping it for another 100 years or 1,000 years, right? And so they needed a system, because like they can't keep the lie alive. They can't keep pretending the tanks are full of radiation. Because every new administration, every new employee, you got to keep this lie alive. And so they need to get rid of, that's an incredible, difficult lie to keep alive, right? And hence the alleged dumping, which has never stopped. They can't filter anything. The filters, and I have playlists full of this documentation of why, of the actual documentation of why how this played out. So if you go in there and look for tanks, you'll find so much information. You can convict them in any court on the planet if you actually had a honest system, which you don't have, unfortunately. The data from the briefing, South Korea briefing, showed that the concentrations of radioactivity in the 29 test spots in the water off South Korea Peninsula were less than before Fukushima melted down. In other words, there was nothing. So these models of neptunium dispersals cesium dispersals around the entire planet based on 40 days of fallout. The plutonium fallout. None of this is allowed to be acknowledged. This is the plutonium-239, the worst plutonium. This is only based upon a fraction, by the way. That France's models, everybody's model is wrong. There is no radioactive fallout unless it's tritium. And this one is based on, at this stage, that's 20 days. And so they got 85% of the country in the streets protesting tritium instead of the neptunium and the plutonium and the cesium and the iodines, xenons and everything else. Right? They don't know anything about this. They're protesting what might happen instead of what's non-stop happening for 12 years. Imported seafood containing more than 100 becquerels per liter of radioactive cesium are not allowed to be sold in the Korea retail market. Look at what they're doing here of radioactive cesium, which is a British terminology, folks, in South Korea. Cesium, there's, as I showed you earlier, there's all these other isotopes, right? There's not just, when you hear cesium, that's because they're lying to you. And every isotope got multiple daughters you got to worry about. So you got to worry about all the strontium and their fission daughters, all the cesium, their fission daughters, all the neptunium, their fission daughters, all the americium, their fission daughters. This is just a start, by the way. All the plutonium and their daughters, every one of them. All the uranium and all their endless daughters, because everything's produced from uranium. All the krypton, all the xenons, all the iodines. The curium is the biggest byproduct of radiative fuel rod. You got to worry about all of that. The last one you're worried about is tritium. The last one you're gonna... These are killer isotopes we're talking about. They brutalize all the little insects and birds and animals and fungus and bacteria and everything else. All the fish and all the birds and whales and mammals are shown up emaciated because of uranium, plutonium, curium, and not tritium. The government is trying to address the problem that might arise later on, such as decline in seafood consumption. Right, so the crystal ball says nothing is going to happen, so therefore we shouldn't stop poisoning ourselves with radioactive food from the Pacific Ocean. What's it to them if you don't eat the extra fish anyway? You're not allowed to live in South Korea unless you eat fish. Adding that the safety of the seafood is scientifically ensured when it's absolutely unequivocally, the last thing in their equation is scientific information, rather. And calling it leakage, radioactive water leakage, had no effects on the seas off the Korean coastline. This was a nuclear engineering professor at the Kyunghee University told the Korean Herald. So to suggest that there's no adverse effects on Korea, despite the fact that they recognize this on different administrations, before you turn out all the lights. What do we got here? Let's see. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate. That's 2013 trying to warn you. Korea's called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. 2011. 2023, Korea calls Fukushima handling of Fukushima awesome. Wonder Bars. South Korea shipped 6 million pounds back because it's incredibly radioactive that they imported, for instance. And they found hotspots, multiple hotspots in South Korea. There were 6 seaweed samples in one test of the radioactive iodine in South Korea. So to say there's absolutely no impact is criminal. It's actually criminal what they're doing. A 1,000% normal background radiation in South Korea. South Korea actually kept their children home because of radioactive fallout. Let me see. Where are we to? See if I can find it. Can't keep up with the evil, eh? I'll find it. Just give me a second. I want to put that. I want to put that in. You know, as the public, possibly worldwide, gets sick, the truth will come out about Fukushima. That's 2011, for goodness sakes. The only way to preserve human life is completely turn away from nuclear power. Why can't I find it? I can always find it when I don't want it. Just hang on. I want to have it at, I don't have it in my pile, so I got to stick it there anyway. There's just that one headline I want to get. When you see the carnage worldwide like this, maybe it'll come to their senses. I put it on the big screen while I'm looking for it, because it's kind of entertaining. Radiation is everywhere but South Korea. That's pretty amazing. They must have like a shield around South Korea to stop the radiation from coming in there, maybe. That's what's going on. But they don't want to tell the world they have such a shield, right? Because everybody's going to want it. And they won't give them any leverage if they give everybody a shield to protect their countries from radioactive fallout. Obviously, that's what's going on. What the hell, man? That's supposed to... There it is. Rain caused 130 schools in South Korea to close. Rain caused 130 schools in South Korea to close. Let me put that in my pile. Hang on here now. There we go. Let me put a 1 in front of that. Oh. Yep, that works. Okay. Man, what a strange country South Korea turned out to be. The universities and the academics, the nuclear scientists, the government agencies and the media are turned against the country, the people of the country. They're attacking everybody in the country who won't repeat their narrative verbatim. How do we rescue South Korea from this kind of evil? Because that's some real evil we're talking about, right? I had, it was like 15 views on my video from 9 a.m. this morning till the night. 15. La 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 la, crazy. La 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 la, nuclear. So now I got 52 views after almost 2 hours. Right, so they're gone nuts. They're gone. Well, I mean, if they watch it themselves, a lot of them will probably commit suicide in the nuclear industry, right? They realize how evil they actually are, so. They got nobody to censor. They got Dana, and that's it. There is no, and I mean it, there is no dissenting voices out there. And so they're going to beat the shit out of me every day for the rest of my life, basically. Starlight, well, wants to know if I have any idea on the sub that is missing here off my coastline. That's out looking, they were bringing tourists out for the Titanic, right? And it's $250,000 a head. $250,000 a head. And they're down at around 12,000 feet, is it? I think. Which is probably 5,000 pounds per square inch, I think. It's around 14.5 pounds per square inch every 33 feet. And so I think it's around 5,000 pounds or higher, obviously probably higher. And so if they get a little pinhole in that submarine, that'll implode. It'll happen so quick they won't. Now the submarines don't have communication, right? Those particular types. They can basically send a little ping out. But if they get a breach in this one-off submarine, then it'll crumble faster than a blink of an eye. Faster than a blink of an eye, it'll be the equivalent of getting hit by a car traveling at, say, 600 miles per hour. And you're crossing the road, and the car hits you. That's the equivalent of those submarines imploding, because you're talking about, imagine 5,000 pounds per square inch. So imagine a transport truck is right above you, hanging above you, and someone lets it go. So when it impacts you, it's instantaneous. You're like a fly on a windshield at 100 miles per hour. You're boom, bam. But we got more important things to talk about. We got the contamination of the entire planet, the extinction of most of the species. We got censorship that is just, it's frightening. The censorship is just over the top. And they got my phone number. They can call in and challenge my narrative anytime they want, right? They can debate me anytime they want. They can invite me on their TV shows anytime they want. They can. I don't hide away from fucking anybody. I don't hide away from nothing. I don't give a fuck about nothing out there in the nuclear industry. I'm not scared of anything. I'm not scared of journalists. I'm not scared of anything. I'm honest, and so I don't hide from anything. I don't wilter away from it either. I can look anybody in the eye, period. I can stare anybody in the eye. Bobby, you ever wanted to go to see Billy? And I'm not going to sit in silence. Yeah, I might not never win the battle. I might not change nothing, even though I've already changed the industry forever. The industry is dying because we're here every day, 5 days a week, year after year after year after year after year after year. Will South Korea's hateful, vicious, idiotic Fukushima tanks propaganda compromising? So it should have been, is South Korea vicious, hateful, idiotic Fukushima tanks propaganda compromising the country's future? Because I ran out of digits, right? And I was going to change the narrative. I put will, and I didn't even put 2 L's there, I don't think, did I? I put 1 L there. I ran out of letters, right? Because you can only put 100 characters there. And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to put that up there. I'll challenge all nuclear scientists to mixed martial arts combat anywhere on the planet. I'll come meet you. Any nuclear scientist. I could probably kill any nuclear scientist on the planet with 1 punch. Not that I can punch or anything, but when it comes to nuclear scientists, I can probably slap them to death. I'm an old man. I'm not very healthy. And I believe one of my stents have moved. And I might have to get surgery again to deal with that. And if I survive that, I'll be back and kick the shit out of the nuclear industry right away, like the last time. Summer starts tomorrow, I think. Is it the 21st or 22nd or something? And we're still in single digits. We barely get up to 10-degree temperatures down there. Summer's supposed to start maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday. It could be another week or two before it finally shows up. I got a few things fixed on the truck. I should be good to tow the boat down. I'm going to try and see how it goes. I got a big bolt in one of my tires. I picked up the kit today to plug the hole, but you should be using these vulcanized patches from the inside, right? They're pretty expensive. We got a pretty small budget. I don't know. But all I know is one thing I can do is I can do these presentations each night. And because that implies a lot of people in the nuclear industry, right? Because they need to censor everybody. So if I don't do this, the nuclear industry will go crazy. They've got no one to pick on. They got nothing to do. Kevin Blanche said it. The tank water fairy tale. Yeah, it's a fairy tale. It's a terrible, horrific, horrifying fairy tale. It's just absolutely horrifying. Yeah, and so why didn't they let the Olympic teams eat the Fukushima food during the Olympics? Remember how they sent, that's a great comment, James, thank you. Stephen Young, hi Stephen, Peace Where. Namie, I was only kidding when at the beginning of the show when I said I can't blame anybody for not watching these shows. All of a sudden, nobody watches the shows. I count on the nuclear industry showing up to censor me. At least I always have a small audience, right? P. Hig, Dana Nasana. Good night, everybody. Katja. Good night, everybody. Albert. Robert. Cramp. Yeah, hi there. Might as well do a shout out, I figured. I got a few minutes to kill. I burnt out last night. It was a tough day yesterday. John Shiflett. Gonna end the poll here in a moment, folks. What do we get tonight? I wonder. We'll see when the show's over. Probably got like 60 views. I've never seen these low numbers yesterday and the day before. Starlight. Don Vincent. Good night, everybody. I'm a little down here tonight, I notice. I'm a bit depressed about what South Korea is doing. I've been like that all day. Well, it's like a week now, but today was really, the propaganda was really nasty, and I was like, how can we have a future when governments and universities and medias insist on massive propaganda about nuclear to manipulate the population so they can poison everybody without feeling bad, I guess. John Curtis. Peace where. Kevin Blanche. I think I got everybody. Let's end the poll. Ending poll. We got 37 votes on the poll, which is double the people we got watching the show. And South Korea is destroying their country now. And I don't know why. What's to be accomplished by destroying your own country and your food and everything else and your fresh water? I don't understand that kind of evil. Thank goodness, I guess. But I, for one, can't sit in silence, and that's a curse for me. Well, it's midnight. I guess I should give it up, I suppose. I always feel guilty when I give up my show every night. When I stop the show, I feel that I'm not doing enough for the world. I'm not doing enough for the birds and the bees and the ants and the flowers and the insects. I apologize to all of them. I'm trying my best. I'll try harder tomorrow. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Don't eat anything from Korea, folks. Don't buy anything from South Korea. Let's try to punish them. And shame on them. Shame on the nuclear universities and academics of all disciplines for being silent. Shame on the journalists in South Korea for stabbing everybody in the back. Did you really go to school to do that? Why are you so dark? Why are you so evil? Shame on you. Hugs for everybody else. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow night. God bless. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far, folks. Have a great night. See everybody tomorrow night. Take care now.